A former Liberal Attorney General is raising the alarm that Iranian sleeper cells in Canada may target regime dissidents.
The United Conservative Party held on to Olds-Didsbury-Three Hills in a recent by-election in Alberta.
The Oshawa City Council killed a motion which would have formally requested prosecutors and police enforce existing drug laws. Hello Canada, it's Wednesday, June 25th, and this is the True North Daily Brief. I'm Isaac Lamoureux.
And I am Zoltan.
We've got you covered with all the news you need to know. Let's discuss the top stories of the day and the True North exclusives you won't hear anywhere else. Former Attorney General and Liberal Justice Minister Irwin Cotler is raising alarms about the presence of Iranian sleeper cells residing in Canada as tensions rise in the Middle East. Cotler said these covert agents could be activated to target critics of Tehran within Canada. Cotler has been an outspoken critic of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and was allegedly the target of an assassination plot last year. He told the Globe and Mail on Tuesday, quote, "Right now, their policy is to target Jews and others abroad. We also know that they activate sleeper cells that are already present in the country." Israeli media reports also allege that senior Iranian regime officials were attempting to seek asylum in Canada following the Israeli military strikes on Iran earlier this month. Cotler also stressed the need for the Canadian Security Intelligence Service to collaborate with all levels of law enforcement in the coming weeks to avoid, quote, "any untoward Iranian penetration at this time." CSIS said in a report last week that the agency, quote, "continues to investigate threats to life emanating from the Islamic Republic of Iran based on credible intelligence." The spy agency noted how Iran predominantly uses proxies to target its enemies in Canada, including criminal networks, and, quote, "may increase depending on developments in the Middle East and the Iranian regime's own threat perceptions." According to former RCMP Commissioner Bob Paulson, police and CSIS will be lit up in their search for activated sleeper cells and other illicit networks with ties to Iran, as well as lone wolf attacks. So Alex, with mass immigration, there is a large Iranian diaspora, but how many of those are connected with the IGRC or the Islamic Republic in Iran government?
Well, CBSA told us that as of June 6, 2025, under the designation of the Iranian regime, approximately 17,800 applicants were reviewed for potential inadmissibility, with 131 visas also being canceled by the IRCC. 115 investigations have been opened by the CBSA, and additional investigations will be opened as new information becomes available. 49 investigations have been concluded by the CBSA, which means that the individuals in question were either not in Canada or determined to be a senior official in the Iranian regime and therefore not inadmissible for this reason. The remaining cases are subject to ongoing investigations or enforcement action. 20 persons have been reported inadmissible by the CBSA for being a senior official in the Iranian regime, with 19 cases involving individuals in Canada that have been or will be sent to the Immigration Division of the IRB for inadmissibility hearings. 3 referrals were withdrawn by the CBSA before the case could proceed any further. The CBSA has requested the scheduling of 12 of these cases, while the rest continue to undergo preparations prior to being sent for scheduling. Of these 12 cases, 5 inadmissibility hearings have been concluded, resulting in decisions by the ID. 3 individuals were found inadmissible for being prescribed senior officials and issued deportation orders. 1 has been removed from Canada. 2 individuals were found not admissible by the Immigration Department, and CBSA has filed their appeal to the Immigration Appeal Division in both cases. 1 case has subsequently been withdrawn by the CBSA, and 6 cases are ongoing. For further information on the implementation of the designation and actions taken to date, you can consult the website of the CBSA, as well as border measures to keep war criminals out of Canada. The United Conservative Party has held on to Olds-Didsbury-Three Hills, fending off a challenge from the newly formed Republican Party of Alberta by a large margin. The RPA, Republican Party of Alberta, ran its leader Cam Davies against UCP candidate Tara Sawyer, who ultimately secured a decisive victory. Some residents told True North they thought that prior to the Republican Party of Alberta popping up, the Alberta UCP would garner 80% of the vote. With all of the new polls now reporting, and a total of 15,318 votes cast in the riding, Sawyer received 9,363 votes, or 61.12%, while Davies of the RPA earned 2,705 votes, or 15.6% of the vote, falling well behind the NDP candidate. candidate. Alberta NDP candidate Beverly Taves finished second with 3,061 votes, or just under 20%, while the Wild Rose Loyalty Coalition's Bill Tufts came in with just 189 votes, or 1.23%. The race marked the Republican Party's first electoral test, its formation earlier this year. Speaking to Juno News earlier in the campaign, Sawyer warned that splitting the vote on the right could inadvertently hand the riding to the Alberta NDP. Davies' campaign focused on taking a strong stance against Ottawa and Prime Minister Mark Carney. He said, quote, "Mark Carney wrote the book on how to be a socialist. Trudeau might have just read a couple pages. This man is dangerous, and he's focused on a mission to fundamentally alter Canada in a way that isn't helpful to Alberta." So, Isaac, do the results in Olds-Didsbury-Three Hills raise concerns about splitting the right-wing vote?
Well, Alex, I actually think the right answer is yes and no. Obviously, splitting the vote did not alter the results of any of the three Alberta ridings, meaning if every single vote for the Republican Party of Alberta were for the UCP in all three of the by-elections, the results would be the same, with the Alberta NDP still winning Edmonton-Ellerslie and Edmonton-Strathcona, and of course the UCP still winning Olds-Didsbury-Three Hills. So vote splitting was not concerning this time around from a results perspective. However, I was watching the results come in live in Olds at the UCP watch party, and interestingly, former MLA Nathan Cooper, who resigned the seat in Olds after he was promoted to be Alberta's representative in Washington, was delivering the results as they came in and discussing them. And at one point, with only a few polling stations reporting, it did look like vote splitting could have been concerning in Edmonton-Ellerslie, as at the time, the UCP and RPA totals were higher than the NDP, but the NDP had a higher total than the UCP. Obviously, that didn't end up being the case, but for future provincial by-elections and the provincial election, this could be a different story in tight ridings.
Isaac, should the Alberta NDP be happy about the election results of these three by-elections?
Yeah, Alex, I think these by-elections went about as good as the Alberta NDP could have expected. They certainly expected to win Edmonton-Strathcona, despite UCP candidate Darby Crouch's optimism, especially considering the Conservatives have not won that riding in over 4 decades. I was less confident the NDP would win Edmonton-Ellerslie, as it appeared UCP candidate Naresh Bhardwaj had a lot of support, and I don't think the NDP think they had a chance in Olds, given projections expected around 80% of the vote for right-wing parties, so even splitting the vote would not have resulted in an NDP victory, and this was the case. Also, the NDP, as you said, narrowly got more votes than the RPA in that riding.
On that note, Isaac, how did the Republican Party of Alberta react to the result?
Yeah, so I obviously interviewed RPA leader Cam Davies right after the results came in, and he framed the results as a significant win for his brand new party and emphasized his long-term momentum. He was surprisingly upbeat, though, I found, about the outcome in Olds-Didsbury-Three Hills. He said, quote, "We're super stoked to see that a large number of Albertans chose to mark Republican for the first time in their life. The first voters for a Republican Party in Canada, in fact, were cast tonight." He also stressed that the campaign's timeline was short and that the party is just beginning. He said, quote, "2 months ago, we were just barely getting started. This is the start line, not the finish line. We are just rolling up our sleeves, just getting started." He also said the UCP lost some support to his party, which he suggested will continue to grow. Still, when I was talking to residents in Olds on Monday, I think there was an expectation that the RPA would perform better than they did, so we'll have to see how Albertans react and whether support will continue to grow for the party, or if it can win a future by-election, or result in splitting the vote, where without them, a left-wing party that wins would not have been victorious. Oshawa City Council was poised to vote on a motion that would formally request the Federal Prosecution Service to enforce drug crimes within the city. This move came after years of vandalism, attacks, and other related criminal activity. However, a procedural issue raised by a councillor ultimately led to the motion being defeated before it could be voted upon. The motion, titled Controlled Substances Within the City of Oshawa, would have applied citywide, but primarily targeted the downtown core. It also asked the Durham Regional Police Service to follow the efforts of Edmonton and Peterborough's policies in arresting and seizing drugs to deter flagrant drug use. Before reaching a vote, one councillor, Derek Giberson, raised a point of order, stating that the motion breached Supreme Court case law. Due to the point of order, the decision was handed to the chair, in this case, Mayor Dan Carter, who agreed. Giberson told True North he argued that the motion was illegal as it was a, quote, attempt to direct both prosecutors and law enforcement, and that it violated long-held separations of politics, the judiciary, law enforcement, and prosecutors. The motion, however, was checked and approved by the city solicitor, who found the motion to be legal. When asked what procedural law was violated, Giberson said his challenge wasn't specific to any procedure by law, but that that the motion was, quote, contrary to Canada's system of laws. Carter did not respond when asked if it was common to rule a point of order based on the legal opinion of a member of council who is not a lawyer over the opinion of the city solicitor. So, Alex, the motion was killed before it could be voted on, but what were advocates of the motion saying, and what issues did they hope it would address?
Yeah, so one of the things that we have reported on at True North is the fact that prosecution services of Canada have actually been dropping cases against folks suspected and alleged of drug trafficking, particularly in Ontario. So I think that the purpose of the motion, had it been successful, would have been to enforce action on behalf of those prosecution services. They, in an email exclusively to True North, said that it was due to their requirement to be stewards of public funds. Folks who have been paying close attention to court cases in Ontario might find that explanation troubling, nebulous, and confusing, given the very expensive trials that have been conducted in Ontario against protesters, particularly those involved in the anti-Trudeau or anti-mandate protests of 2022. So I think that the motion was well-intentioned, and it's unfortunate to see that it didn't pass. In an article that True North published in January of this year, Hamilton, Ontario Police Chief Frank Bergen voiced his frustration and disappointment at the Police Services Board meeting after learning that the Public Prosecution Services of Canada dropped 19 drug trafficking charges laid by Hamilton officers earlier in the year. The Public Prosecution Services of Canada handles prosecutions for federal statutes, such as charges under the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act, including trafficking. Bergen said many serious cases, notably those involving the trafficking of highly deadly fentanyl, had been stayed or withdrawn without reasonable explanation. When we reached out for comment, the Public Prosecution Services of Canada said, as with all public agencies, we are managing our operations within our allocated budget. This is one of our key responsibilities and is tied to the sound stewardship of public funds. And so the budget cuts are prompting concerns among Ontario police services, including in Oshawa, obviously, about why certain drug cases have been stayed or withdrawn since the start of the year, including charges against a Hamilton man who is amongst one of Canada's most wanted.
That's it for today, folks. Thanks for tuning in. You can stay on top of new episodes every weekday by subscribing to the Daily Brief on iTunes and Spotify. Also, while you're at it, make sure to hit us with a 5-star rating and please leave a review.